Dave, first of all, how do you feel today's AGM went?
Yeah, I thought it was a good AGM. The fact that probably we beat Aberdeen last night maybe took the edge off some of the footballing questions, and it's just one of these things where you live with each week and each loss in that sense. However, from an AGM point of view, where really what you're doing is reviewing the results over the last year. I thought it went well. I think the questions were all very, very relevant. So overall, I was happy with it.
How long do you think it will be before the club is completely self-sufficient and not reliant on shareholder loans, and what will have to change for that to happen?
I think it will still be a couple of years. And I say that because the only way we can be self-reliant is to have continued success in Europe. It's not enough to qualify for Europe and get knocked out at the early stages. So I think only when we feel that we are sufficiently resourced to be reasonably sure that we get into Europa League, get to knockout stages and occasionally Champions League, I think at that level we'll be self-sufficient. So if you were to ask me, I would still say we're probably 2 to 3 years away from that.
Until this point, the club has received loans from a small group of shareholders. Would it be the intention of the board to seek further external investment into the business?
Yes, there is. I think that if you look at the number of shareholders, and if you take my previous comment, I still think about a couple of years to go, I think it would be unwise of us to only have such a narrow pool of investors. So certainly one of the things I'm looking at the moment is to try and spread not only the number of investors, but find other ways to bring finance into the club.
How significant is or would the passing of Resolution 11, and what are the plans for that if the outcome is positive?
Resolution 11 it's not significant in the sense that Resolution 10 still allowed us to raise the money. I think the advantage of Resolution 11 is that clearly we still have a lot of shareholders who are not supporting the club. And in terms of a new fundraising capability, I'd much rather we were financing with people who were supporting us than not supporting us. So at least Resolution 11 gives us the flexibility to target the investors that we want and those who we believe will continue to support the running of losses for a couple of years, because one of the things you've got which makes the club difficult is when you've got certain investors who want to make a profit, and we're arguing that making a profit doesn't make sense for the club. We've got to invest in the squad, and only, as I said earlier, just give us that 2 or 3 years to get back into Europe, and only then can we look at something that's more self-sufficient.
With the deal with Sports Direct coming to an end in the summer, how close are the club to announcing their new retail setup?
The arrangements we've got with Sports Direct means that we can't go to the market yet. There's certain time frames. So what we are doing at the moment is we're putting together the appropriate plans as to what the offerings we want to take to the market at that point in time. So just now it's pretty much preparation, whereas the situation with the kit is different. The kit deal, Puma are obliged to give us notification today, in fact, as to whether they want to extend that, and they've already done that. So we are now actively from tomorrow, in fact, actively into negotiations on looking at the kit sponsor, whether it's Puma or someone else.
What other revenue streams are the club pursuing, and how do you feel the club is taking full advantage of the revenue streams currently open to them?
Well, look, we haven't taken full advantage, but because it hasn't been open to us, and they're still not currently open. But if you look at where we're going forward, I think that the Sports Direct deal was just so narrow and so restrictive that the revenue streams are very limited. But what we're doing now is we're looking at all of the other areas, and there are commercial opportunities that we haven't exploited, that we're looking at the moment, that we think can be very, very significant going forward. And a lot of that's around social media and different products other than the replica kits. And we're finding that globally the trend, not just in football, but in basketball, baseball, there is a decline generally in the sale of replica kits. So it's not a market we can continue to rely on for our growth.
What role do shareholders such as Club 1872 have going forward, both as a major stakeholder in the club and as a vehicle for fan representation?
Yeah, I think Club 1872 has been very, very important. I think, as you know from previously, I've supported it. I think it is good, and I've been around the club long enough to know how difficult it is when you've got a level of disparate shareholder groups with different agendas, all putting pressure on the board. So it makes our life a lot easier, and I think it's easier for the supporters to get their voice across when you've got fewer, more concentrated vehicles. So we have that in 1872, both in terms of supporter representation, but also the substantial shareholding gives them an additional level of support, because they're now very, very, very significant shareholder who we have to speak to, not only because they're customers and supporters.
If I can move to on-field matters and the search for a new manager, do you have a timescale of when a new manager will be appointed, and did the board have a timescale in mind when the previous manager departed?
The timescale in mind when he departed was to do it as soon as possible, but being thorough. So what that means is, if in terms of our investigations and evaluations, a manager popped up quite quickly that we felt was absolutely the right person, then we'd have sealed it as soon as we possibly could. But it wasn't going to be an appointment that we're making just for the sake of being speedy. And in this specific circumstance, if we looked at what was available at this point in the season, even after evaluation, we just didn't feel that there was an outstanding candidate that we were willing to invest 3 years into, because it's a position we're looking for 3 years. So it really forced us to look outside of what is available to players who are currently on contract. And as soon as you move into that area, it's a different type of negotiation. You've got to talk to clubs, you've got to talk about compensation. So it's taken maybe longer than we would have liked, but not longer than is necessary. It's just such a key appointment. Whether we take another week or so should not be a factor in deciding an appointment you're going to make for 3 years.
Has it taken longer than expected, or than you maybe expected at the start?
It's taken longer than expected, in the sense that, certainly from my perspective, I really thought that the pool of available candidates would have been a lot stronger, and a lot of that was to do, I guess, with names. I had some name recognition of some of the individuals, but it was only when Mark very thoroughly went through, you know, their background, track record, and it's not right or wrong, it's just a fit for Rangers at this point in time, and we mapped that against what we think is important for a manager for Rangers at this point in time. And there was criteria we set, you know, knowledge of British football. I think what we didn't want to do was go for a foreigner who had no experience of British and Scottish football. So some of the criteria that we set down were quite difficult for some of these players to stand up against, and we ended up, I repeat, then looking at people who are in contract, and now we're actually more identifying targets than just being reactive to those who applied for the position.
The board made a significant amount of money available for transfers in the summer. Are you happy with how that's been spent?
I'm not happy in retrospect, in the sense that, you know, it was spent in accordance with Pedro's wishes and Pedro's requirements. You know, he felt very, very strongly that there were certain key positions that he wanted in place with certain key players. He was happy to spend quite a big bit of his budget on these players as well. But that was based on how Pedro saw himself running the team for the next year and how he saw himself closing the gap against Celtic. Obviously, Pedro's not there. And then we've got a squad that was chosen for a certain purpose that, of course, might not be what the incoming manager wants. So it's obviously an awkward time for everyone at the club, because we've really got to wait till the new manager comes in and he looks at the squad, and it may be he likes the look of what he sees, but it also may be that he'd like to do some rotations.
Will that make you and the board more cautious in the future with regards to making funds available for a new manager?
It won't make us more cautious in terms of making funds available, because we have to make funds available. If we don't make funds available, we're not going to become #1 in Scotland. So we have to do that. I think that's a non-negotiable. I think where we have been a little bit more cautious is that, as much as we felt Pedro was the right person for the job, I think at this stage, I repeat, we're looking for more British-Scottish experience. So we're more cautious in who we're appointing, but we're not going to be more cautious in supporting the manager with investment. But we're going to back whoever we appoint, as we did with Pedro.
You touched a little on Mark Allen. How pleasing to have him on board, and how impressed are you with the changes he is implementing, such as the new scouting network he's set up?
Mark has been fantastic and very refreshing. You know, I've been around the club for about 20 years, and the level of professionalism, the level of thoroughness where he's going about mapping not only the footballing qualities that we expect of players and management, but also the personal characteristics that we think it's important if you are a player or you are a manager to succeed at a club like Rangers and an environment like Glasgow.
What did the board hope the club would be able to achieve on the field this season, and have those expectations changed given the start to the season?
I hope that we would comfortably, as a minimum, come second, and I hope that we would have a realistic challenge for Celtic. I think that clearly hasn't happened. So the expectations have changed to the extent that we're partly through the season and there's already a gap against Celtic, but still the ambition to come second, I think that's well within our scope this season.
Will the new manager have funds available in January?
January, again, it'll depend on how he assesses his squad. You know, we'll sit down with him if he feels. I mean, the short-term answer would be yes, but it's a decision he's going to have to make. He's going to have to decide himself whether he'd rather work with what he's got for a while and go big in summer, or whether he thinks he'd like to accelerate that and do some of it in January. So that's going to be a combination, I guess, of two things. One, his personal assessment of what he thinks he's got in the squad, and then secondly, whether he believes that those who are available in January can add value long term, or whether it's better for him to wait for the summer. But that's either going to be him, but certainly the attitude is to back him, whether it's in January or whether it's in the summer.
You obviously spent so much money in the summer. Does that perhaps diminish the amount available for January and then future windows?
It doesn't diminish for January, because our plan has always been to spend significantly in the summers and then to top up in January depending on where we are. So that hasn't changed. Even if Pedro was in position, you know, I was aware that Pedro had two specific players identified that he wanted to bring in January. So, you know, the fact that Pedro's not there, I think, makes no difference to that. It's going to be the new manager to sit down and just decide how much of the cash that's going to be available to him he wants to spend in January versus saving for the summer. And I guess it's going to take him, you know, a couple of weeks to come in, assess the squad, you know, see what he feels and look at the level of rotation that he thinks he needs within the squad.
In hindsight, do you think it was a mistake to appoint a manager in March before the director of football role was filled?
No, I don't think so. We needed a manager at that point in time, and for the director of football to come in, it wasn't just a question of filling the position. The first thing the director of football had to do was to come and do an analysis and prepare structures. The director of football, you know, wouldn't have everything at his fingertips on day one. So if we'd have waited for the director of football, it would have taken us a couple of months. And I don't think the club should have gone without a manager for a couple of months at that time, particularly given that we thought we had a good candidate.
Supporters have sold out every weekend home league match this season and sold a record number of season tickets. Is there a worry though that the lack of success on the field will see some begin to drift away?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's an absolute fact. If the club is not successful on the field, fans will drift away. I mean, it's always been that way and it always will be that way. I think what we've got at the moment is we've got a level of support that's above the level of success I think that the club's had on the pitch, and that's the kind of, to some extent, the defiance of the supporters to say we're going to support our team no matter what. But we're very alert to the fact that as things normalise, we'll go back to the normal fluctuations. When you're doing well, more people will attend. When you're not doing as well, less people will attend. And we get that because there's a lot of demands on people's money. And if they're not getting the product on the Saturday and they're not getting the satisfaction, they're going to spend it elsewhere. So it's something we're very alert to. But you know, given our plan is to get back to being the number one and back to competing in Europe, hopefully we will be giving them a product that makes them want to continue to come to Ibrox and watch the team.
And just to finish, various improvements to the stadium have been made since the board took office in 2015. What further improvements can supporters expect in the coming year?
There's probably two categories to that. I think that a lot of the work that we've done over the last couple of years probably is not rightly termed improvements. I think what we've really been doing is refurbishing and repairing a stadium that had become dilapidated to get it back to being fit for purpose and something that Rangers supporters should be proud of. And we've spent a lot of money on that side, and we've already committed another several million to improving it. There's areas around roofs within the stands, you know, there's painting, there's a whole bunch of things that we need to be doing there. But I wouldn't regard that as being improvements. But as far as improvements are concerned, we've got some very ambitious plans, both on our own and working with the council for Project 2022, where we're looking at a complete improvement and refurb of the surrounds of the ground and really redeveloping the stadium completely. And that would be a very, 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 very significant improvement in terms of the match day experience for fans.